Welcome to the Soulish podcast. My name is Whitney, and this is my brother Aaron. And I am the host of this podcast. And I'm so excited to have finally my brother on the podcast. It's been a long time coming. We've planned this for a while, haven't we?
How many episodes do you have of your podcast?
Gosh, this will be episode, I think, in the 60s. Wow. Yeah, this is like episode 61, 62, something like that.
Took you 60 episodes to have your own brother.
Sorry. I feel so guilty. But we waited because I just moved to Denver, Colorado, and that's where he has lived for the past almost 2 years.
Yes.
So it was like, we have to do this in person.
Yeah.
It's just, you get to see our noses and our mannerisms and how we look like.
This is the one way you know we're siblings.
So I thought this episode was going to be such an amazing episode for you to see siblings together, but also just our journey individually and together has been such a unique thing. And we really want to share that with you guys because we know that one, you'll probably really enjoy listening to it, but also that it's going to be really inspiring and really encouraging for you all.
Where should we start?
I don't even know. Birth. Let's start.
It all began in San Jose.
It all began.
We were both born in San Jose, right?
Yeah.
I was born. We moved away from San Jose when I was 9 months old to Loveland, Colorado.
Yep.
And lived here till I was about 5, so 4.5 years. And then our parents took a church job. So they took an associate pastor job in Loveland, and then they got the senior pastor job back in San Jose.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the main place we grew up in. Springs of Life Fellowship was our church's name that our parents pastored. And that was where we really experienced most of our Christian upbringing.
It was a really interesting shift in our lives because just before that, actually, when we lived here in Loveland, Colorado, our dad got into a really bad accident and he was the passenger, but it ended up really affecting him for the rest of his life. And I still remember driving to the hospital.
Yeah, me too.
And mom crying and also feeding him ice and thinking, I had the thought my dad's dying,
we didn't really know.
This isn't good. You don't know. I mean, I think I was 4. So you must have been 2, almost 3.
His L4 and L5 were like completely herniated or something like that. So,
yeah. He blew out both of those.
Yeah. He talks about how he remembers waking up on the street and seeing a lady running at him and she was like, don't move, don't move. And, when somebody wakes up from a trauma like that, they really don't know where they are yet.
Yeah.
So he's kind of like, whoa, how did I get here? Why is this lady yelling at me? And then she grabs his head and gets C-spine control. And she's like, if you move, you could be paralyzed. You've just been, launched from a car accident. And that's when it set in. And he was like, uh-oh. So he basically struggled with crippling back pain our entire lives. And he had to try to be a senior pastor while he would pretty much lay in bed all week.
Yeah.
And then he would, find the strength within himself to get up on Sundays, loaded up on pain meds and somehow give a sermon and minister, go right back to bed for the next 6 days. And he did that for
years,
about 10 years.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And I think for him too, what we learned in that environment, because really it was an environment of suffering in our home. And I think I never really acknowledged that until I was an adult, that the atmosphere was suffering, was trauma, was pain. And it was also that grit of like, we just have to make it through another week. And so I felt like, even though it was our home was filled with love, like, and total peace, but there was this element too of like, we couldn't just have people over, friends over. We couldn't do sleepovers all the time. Like it really had to be planned and it really had to work out.
Everything revolved around dad.
Yeah.
Because of his pain.
Yeah.
But they did a really good job. I mean, they were just incredible parents, but they did an amazing job at sort of like shielding us to whatever degree they could from the reality of what dad was going through. And they always kept a smile on. And not to mention all of the horrible, toxic bullshit they put up with at the churches they were pastoring at, the political stuff and pastors trying to take their job and spreading rumors about them. And they got put through the ringer, as most pastors do in church. And they shielded us from that too. They never talked bad about a single person who was, betraying them or spreading lies about them. I mean, they were just like the most incredible examples of Christ. They really were.
They really were. And I think also just with that, I think we learned from dad that when you have a purpose, that can really pull you through the worst.
Yeah, big time.
And I think that was a huge driver for us in finding our purpose. What are we meant to do in this life? Because we knew if we had that, then we would have a vision for our life and for our future that couldn't be shaken and couldn't be moved because of situation, circumstance, or experience. So I think that was a really powerful message too, just from childhood that we had.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, many years we spent when we were really young, driving across the country while our parents would, go to different churches and do ministry and stuff. So, I mean, we have endless memories of like, we had this van. It was the first van that had a TV in it.
So cool.
Back seats would lay down. So we would be watching Rugrats and stuff while we were driving across the country. And it was just the best years of our lives as kids. And then as we got into like junior high and definitely through high schools when dad's pain level really took a turn and, he couldn't come to almost any of my baseball or football games and stuff, but I never held it against him for a second because I saw the suffering he was in. I totally understood and had compassion for him. But I think that also did something really great for me. And it was one of many things probably, but I have always had this huge aversion to the message of like, if you don't believe this one way, God will torture you forever or allow you to be tortured, whichever way they'd like to phrase it. And it was just like, I've watched my dad suffer from something that can't even be compared to what people describe as hell is going to be like.
Yeah.
And it was just like settled within me. There's no way a God with any degree of love or compassion could or would do that to someone. Like, surely there's a better plan of redemption God could come up with than that.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what caused me to really question my religious dogmatic beliefs at like 23 or so.
Yeah. I think too, for me, I just saw later more so in adulthood, but even early on in childhood, it just really, we got to see like some of the biggest preachers and pastors around the country, around the Bay Area come through, and they would preach and kind of roll in and roll out.
Yeah.
And not really leave like a deposit of relationship or lasting love, I guess. And I don't know if that's super important, but you could just
wasn't
feel
authentic.
Yeah, you could feel like there wasn't, like it was like a boom, bang, bam song and dance, and then it was like, we're out. And I just saw the inauthenticity and just also the lack of compassion and love for people in a lot of ministers. And that for me started to question like, okay, well, I never want to become that. Like, I always want to be like mom and dad, where they have such a strong love for people and compassion and kindness towards people, no matter what, even people that betrayed them, even people that talked shit about them. And they would still teach people what love is by just demonstrating that, which was just the hugest thing for me. But I think my journey, which I've shared on this podcast, it just, once I stepped into a leadership role in the church and I got to see what it was like to be on the giving end of the sin culture, the honor and shame culture, and just how that felt giving that out, and also feeling the consequences of that. Not that somebody was trying to punish me, but every action has a reaction, right? So it's like these people that trust you as a leader, then you basically expose their sin, which reinforces shame. And that to me just did not feel right. And so I was like, I gotta explore something else, because I don't think this is God. I don't think this is loving people. I mean, I don't even, and in the Bible, we were taught like, when you go to heaven, like everything will be exposed. Everyone will know everything about you. Right. So it was kind of also that fear of like, oh God, like everybody going to see a movie about me.
As long as you have more shit than I do.
I was like, for sure, I have more shit. But yeah, so it's like, you always had this like fear around, like the end of your life. And what is that going to be? What is your life review going to be like? And everybody's going to know. But it just hit me like, this can't be love, because it doesn't feel like love in the way that I'm treating people. But yet this has been ingrained in me that like, this is how a leader is supposed to be and supposed to handle people and their stuff. And so I think it's a really cool place that we're in now. But part of my also questioning was because you led that. Like, even though He's my younger brother. He led this one on questioning things and kind of walking away from religion. Maybe not all of the values of Christianity, but a lot of the religious aspects, the dogmatic fundamentalism, like aspects of Christianity.
Whenever I'm asked about this, two things I say of what I think ultimately caused me to be like, I can't do this anymore, which is really hard to do when you grow up in a religion.
Born and raised.
You can't imagine how hard it is to leave an entire frame of reality behind. Like people that leave cults and stuff, like people, it's easy to talk down about people who get drawn into cults and whatnot, typically hurting people, broken people. Cult leader will tell them all the things that their heart wants to hear, pull them in, and then they get manipulated slowly. And like people that leave cults like that, it's easy to look down on someone who falls into that, but the amount of courage it takes is like really unimaginable. And that's very much how it felt, was like everything you thought you knew about reality does that. And you're left feeling very confused and lost and like sometimes hopeless, sometimes, is there a God and all this stuff. So it can cause a huge identity crisis of faith. But the two things that pushed me over that cliff were, one, I just saw throughout our whole lives over and over again, this system doesn't work. Like 100%. I've tried it for 23 years with all of my heart. And surely if it was true, it would have worked by now. Like I can't stop sinning no matter what I do. I can't stop my mind from wandering. Like I love God with all of my heart, and yet I can't seem to live up to his standard. And it's like you get tired of that feeling of failure at some point. And that was the first part. The second part for me was that the God that was always preached on Sundays and I was taught about in Christian school and whatnot just didn't line up with the God I experienced in my heart. I was like, these are just two different gods. I don't know this God you talk about who's angry and retributive and full of vengeance and wrath. Like I've never experienced that God. So at some point you say, do I follow what I've been taught, what my mind is telling me about God, or do I follow my heart, what my heart says? And ultimately you have to make that decision to follow your heart and leave all the old paradigm behind. And so, one of the first videos I made was why I left Christianity for Jesus. Because it was like, I'm not leaving. I want you guys to know, like, I'm not leaving Jesus. I'm leaving your fake Jesus. I call it Rambo Jesus. I have all these different versions.
I love Rambo Jesus.
He's coming on a stallion with a sword to slay his. It's like, this is not the gospel. This isn't the God revealed in Christ. I want nothing to do with this hypocritical fake version of Jesus you've made up. And this is how, spirituality works, right? It's like, just be willing, like refuse to be what you're not. And what you truly are is revealed. You can't escape it.
Like you can't escape just how you feel and who you actually are. If you're always trying to fake it and be something other than your true authentic self, it's always going to feel fake. And it's always going to feel like you're living kind of a lie. And I think that's basically what I experienced as well, is like, I don't agree with this. I all of a sudden it was like, now I don't really agree with heaven and hell. I don't agree with that concept. I feel like that's such a waste of life and that's such a waste of souls. And I can't imagine God creating things, because like I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't like have kids and then go, well, you should just like go here. You should go to hell, you should go to heaven because you're naughty, you're nice. It's like the Christmas thing.
Big Santa Claus in the sky.
And I just was like, I wouldn't do that to my own kids. So if I'm made from God, right? If I believe that I'm made in his, her, its likeness, then how can I think that that would do something that I wouldn't even do? And I'm not even pure unconditional love, I'm still becoming love in this lifetime. And so, I think that concept of heaven and hell, and once I started questioning that, really a lot of things started to fall off of what feels in alignment, what feels right. And I think ultimately it's brought us to a place of spirituality that we actually have a closer, because both of us were so close with God. Oh my gosh, we had such a sensitivity to the presence of God, to God itself. And had such a hunger growing up, both of us, to know God, to experience God. And we saw a lot of things. Should we tell them some of the things that we saw, like healings and
yeah, all kinds of miracles.
all kinds.
We had a really, like, I guess I would say, for all the things that Christianity did poorly for us, I would say there was an equal amount of amazing things it did for us. One would be, I talk about the idea of like bhakti, which is the yoga of devotion and love for the divine, just getting completely immersed in that love. Like that's pretty much all Christianity really has going for it.
Yeah.
That is poorly lacking in most other Eastern religions. I would say other than Hinduism, I think like Hinduism has the perfect balance of jnana and bhakti, or love and wisdom. Like they have their theology really well figured out, and they have a open-hearted love for the divine. Whereas Buddhism has amazing wisdom and non-duality, but doesn't really touch on the love and devotion, you know? So Christianity has almost nothing right theologically, but they have the highest amount of that bhakti, which we just spent thousands of hours growing up, tens of thousands of hours worshiping God. And I think what that does to your consciousness, the way it expands your perception of God and oneness, is can't be replaced by teaching alone. Yeah. So that I'm thankful for. And then the second thing it did really well for us were the signs and wonders, I think.
I think just as kids too, we were so open. So it was like anything can happen.
It was totally normal.
Yeah. We didn't have any limitations. So, I mean, you even saw one night when my mom's mother was passing away, and we went to Kansas where they live, and stayed for a couple weeks. And Aaron saw like tons of angels and like even demons, like, because it was just kind of this really weird environment of like death, yet also like really cool, awesome experiences. And I'll never forget the spirit. We knew it as the spirit of death come, and it whispered your name twice. Yeah. And so I was like, it's okay. It went away. And then it came back, and cause I told it, if you come back, like, I'm going to wake up my mom. Threat, huge threat.
Mom's gonna whoop your ass.
Mom's gonna whoop your ass. And sure enough, it came. I was like, all right, okay, I'm gonna wake up my mom. Like, you're in big trouble now.
You done did it. About to get an ass whooping.
You're about to get a Janet Abke ass whooping.
So what I remember was, first I saw and this has been interesting since reading Law of One and understanding what Ra says, looking back at all those experiences is amazing. Ra talks about the idea of thought forms.
Yes.
That, thoughts are creative vibrations. So like, if you're thinking about something constantly, you're going to manifest some kind of thought form. Everything has to manifest through thought in some way, Ra says. Yeah. And so thought forms a lot of times take a life of their own, and there can seem to be like, your house is haunted now, or sometimes demonic possession, which is really like a split personality you've created in yourself, which has a life of its own. So I saw, because our grandpa was talking so much about she's going to die any day now, it's not going to be long, and speaking death over his wife, because he was he was so hurt by it. So I think I saw some kind of thought form that was created there, because I went down to the basement to play the ping pong or whatever by myself. And I saw sort of looked like an alligator type of figure, I would say, but it was looking at me, and it just went behind the door like that. And it like, you have that adrenaline spike, and I like,
as a kid,
teleported up those stairs. I ran so fast and just screamed Mom's name. Yeah. And so then, I don't know if it was that night or whatever, we were downstairs praying and interceding for Grandma for healing. And we got so charged up down there. Yep. Like, man,
Mom's reading scripture.
In. Yeah. And I'll never forget. It was the most incredible thing. Mom's hair was flashing with lightning bolts, like huge streaks of light just exploding from her hair. And I was just like staring at it for 10, 20 minutes. And something about, it was her mom, and this meant a lot to her. So I'm sure that she had a lot of, energy in her that was clearly manifesting. So that was an amazing experience.
She was like in a fight zone, for sure.
She was having dreams and premonitions about her mom dying and stuff.
Yeah. So we really grew up in an environment that was so charged like that.
Supernatural stuff all the time.
We saw metal dissolve out of a couple people's bodies. We saw deaf healed, blind healed, back issues healed, so many healings. And there was one time in church, I knew, because it was like one of those nights where the presence of God is what we know it in. We called it in Christianity. The anointing. But I knew it was like, it was there, it was really present. And so I was holding it. I had to go so bad. And I was like, I'm holding it, like waiting, because I knew like something's going to happen. Like I just knew it. And sure enough, I couldn't hold it anymore. And so I turn around and walk up the center aisle. And I see on the back wall of the sanctuary, this flash, and I hear people go, oh, I'm like, damn it, like right when I get up, I'm like, so not fair. But what had happened was, even though there was no outlets on the stage, a bolt of electricity happened in like an arch portal.
Yeah, I don't know.
Something, but yeah.
We would have worship services that were just incredible. Like just think of a couple hundred people like screaming their hearts out to God in devotion and worship. I mean, the vibration in that atmosphere would get so high that like demons would be exorcised from people, healings would happen. And the most amazing one to me was the gold dust.
Yeah.
And what's amazing too is that that's in the law of one. Did you
know
that?
Way. I didn't know that.
Yes. There's a session where Dawn, it's really weird because they don't give much context, but Dawn asks Ra something like, what are the silver flecks that appear on our skin sometimes during meditation? And Ra says something like, it's a thought form manifestation given from the higher self to show you that like you're headed in the right direction, you're ascending type of thing. And so we had this phenomenon happen at our church that was also happening all around America for a while at different churches, where gold dust would appear on our hands, on our Bibles, on our clothes, and our hair. I mean, we would do this and shake it, and just like tons of gold dust would fall out. It happened every Sunday, like clockwork for months, I think.
Yep. And we would save it.
We'd save it. I wonder why nobody ever went in and got it looked at.
I know. I'm thinking like, where's my little thing? I had a little thing of gold dust. I don't know where it went, but we had just like crazy experiences that I look back on and I'm like, no, I can't say it was fake.
Of course not.
It was real. But trying to put that now in like, I guess in context of Law of One, of Course in Miracles even, and just those works and just understandings of like spirituality, why do things happen this way? And I think that's maybe the hugest benefit of our upbringing as Christian pastors' kids, is that we have such a solid foundation of that devotion. And we saw a lot of pastors' kids go south, almost all of them would just have such like a resentment towards God, towards their family, just because their family was so devoted to people. But we saw our parents devote their lives to people, and that charged us with that same love and that same heart for people, because look at what we do now as adults. We're free to do whatever we want, and yet we both have gone into this kind of work. And so I think it's really cool how things like that happen. And I guess the question a lot of people would ask is, why do those things happen? Why do you even need a sign? And I mean, you probably have a fantastic answer for that. I would say that in life, we get presented with opportunities, like little like posts, that are signposts that direct you, encourage you, inspire you. And I think that for Christians, we were open to certain posts, signs, but different things would happen to kind of put an emphasis on maybe what the purpose was of that. What is the purpose of meditation? It's to connect in a really deep way, right? It's meant to also raise your vibration, raise your consciousness so that you're more aware, more awake of the things of the spirit. And so of course that's going to have an emphasis. Something is going to happen and manifest from that in your life. And we see that a lot. People pursue abundance. people pursue different things, spirituality, Kundalini experience, right? We all want that balance between masculine and feminine energies, and we all want something. But I think if we're open to it, so many more things can happen. And I think that was maybe one of the coolest benefits of seeing so many different things,
Yeah.
Glory cloud. That was one.
There's stuff where we could talk all day about the stuff we saw. We really could. I would say that the benefit of seeing miracles and signs and wonders is simply that it really opens your consciousness to the nature of infinity and the mystery of God, and that you don't know everything.
Limitlessness. Right?
Limitlessness. And I think as we evolve spiritually, we start to realize more and more that we really don't know anything. Like Ra says, everything is clad with mystery. Everything begins and ends in mystery. And actually living in that place is really the only way to truly know the divine, is to know it as an ever unfolding mystery. And so miracles basically just do that. It's like they show you that you don't have reality figured out, and there's so much more to be known here. So like press on, there's mystery to be solved. And they ask Ra about why is the UFO phenomenon happening right now in the way it is? And Ra basically says to open your collective consciousness to the mysterious, or they actually say to open you to the nature of infinity, which is often best resembled as mystery. Like, I love that idea.
Yeah. That's so good. That's so good.
Yeah.
Because it's true. I think that's one thing in religion is you have everything, mapped out. Like
we know all the truth. It's like, if you don't think you know all the truth, then you're not a real Christian.
Yeah.
It's like the most impossible angle to see the divine from. Like, I know, like, well, you're fucked now.
Yeah.
Definitely have no shot.
Because everything is boxed in, including your future, including what will happen. And then you're wondering, like, we watched Megiddo, Armageddon, any Antichrist, like Rapture movie that came out, we would spend hours rewatching those and memorizing them for fear of missing the signs. And so I think, things like that it's so mapped out, even your future is mapped out, and you have to have a destiny, right? Which is predestined, which you can't escape. And I think that there's some truth to some of those things, but it's so boxed in that it doesn't give any room for mystery, any room for an adventure of discovery of yourself, right? Self-inquiry is not really something that you do in religion, or at least Christianity, as much as you do in spiritualities, because everything is possible. There's nothing that's technically impossible. You can discover and go places during meditation that you can't in this physical body, right? And so like astral projection, I mean, that was one of your biggest, and still is probably one of your biggest YouTube videos, right?
Oh yeah, it's my biggest video by far. But I only actually have 3 videos on the topic. It was the first, I would say NDEs were the first outside of the normal Christian frame that I ventured into. We talked about NDEs a lot, but and then from there I got into astral projection. And I remember reading about it one night. I'd never heard of this before. And I was reading like a forum board or something of people talking about their experiences astral projecting to these other planes and realms and having adventures. And I was like, there's no way this is true. And I'm gonna, if this is true, like, I'm not gonna stop until I can do this. And it also became, for a while, I was really wanting to learn how to do it, because there's this idea of soul retrievals they talk about, which is like souls who get lost after death. One of them is called a consensus reality. Wow. Where they say that everyone who like believes a certain religion, and they're like fully convinced, of that religion being the one truth, well, they will project their consciousness to a consensus reality, sort of like magnetism for consciousness. Like, all the souls who have the same belief and ideology will end up in the same plane, and they will all create a consensus reality of like worshiping God on a throne.
Yes. Because we were taught that our whole lives.
Yeah, this is what heaven is.
See his feet.
Pearly gates, streets of gold, eternal worship service.
Yeah.
So I thought about mom and dad being stuck there. And the idea is like souls stay there until they start questioning their reality and going, surely this can't really be it though. And then, you know, they'll start to find other realms in the astral plane to explore and go, oh, it's not the only truth.
Wow.
So I was thinking about reading this. I was thinking about mom and dad. I'm like, they're definitely going to be there for thousands of years. So I was like, I need to learn how to astral project so that when they die, I can go retrieve them and help them get out of these realms they could be stuck in.
Up, man.
So I was like all in, and I had incredible experiences through astral projection. And then after a while, the phenomenon sort of wore off on me. And I was like, but what else? Like, I want what is the ultimate truth? Like, who am I? Who's the source? Like, I need something that can actually lead me to peace of mind, because astral projection wasn't doing it. So that's when I started reading Alan Watts and Eckhart. And then that just led me down the rabbit trail to eventually finding Law of One and ACIM.
Which is, it's crazy, like what that's done in your life, in the lives of people. And it's so cool.
I know.
Like, he's so cool.
It's just amazing how your journey can be almost like so many other people's journey. Like, we're all connected.
We are.
Like, the fact that I went through all that was the catalyst for hundreds of thousands of other people who've been helped by my content now.
Yeah.
And I would have never known that at the time. It's like, you have to just be in the unfolding. You have to be in the journey. And that's why predicting your life, predicting your future is really just a limitation. And people are like, well, shouldn't I have desires and things that I want to manifest? It's like, yeah, of course, that's fine, but hold them very loosely, because you have to know that the divine always has a way better plan than you can ever come up with. So it's like, if you're really stuck on this one thing, the source will give you that, because it's your own free will. And that's not a bad thing if it does, but it's like, you could have had so many other possibilities that would maybe be a lot more epic than that you just couldn't have seen with your limited reference frame.
Right.
So it's like, I have this desire for whatever, but source, I'm holding this loosely. If you've got a better plan, by all means, like, that's really the place of power to be living from, I think.
Yeah. I'm always asking for that. Like, show me what I don't see, pull me out from my limited perspective, even though I really want to see outside of the box, and I'm holding loosely, I'm remaining unattached to outcomes, expectations, the things that I want and feel like I need in my life. I'm still going to remain unattached and open to whatever it is that comes. But I think that's a prayer that you can pray daily. That's something that you can have as a prayer or a meditation of, like, God, source, universe, spirit, show me a different perspective, show me a different angle on my life, because I want to know. Yeah. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. And that there's nothing like, I taught Law of Attraction for the first year or so I was on YouTube. I always taught it from the angle of, like, Law of Attraction is really the universe's way of tricking you into healing yourself. So like, really just make that the focus and you'll attract a lot better stuff. But eventually I just got tired of it, because it's like, this isn't the highest truth available. And I'm interested in, like, what's the most cutting edge truth I can possibly attain right now. And it was truly finding the state of desirelessness. Like, that's the highest state. And for people, that's a bit of a turnoff sometimes, because there's so many desires in the system. And there's this belief in people that romantic relationship will save me. It will complete me.
Fulfill me.
Yeah. And of course it won't. It's like, whatever the desires are that your ego believes will save it, it's like, you're just painting the prison cell different colors. It's all the same thing. It's a desire, which is bondage. Buddha talks about grasping is suffering, grasping at life. So it's like, you can chase your desires and fulfill them one by one and prove to yourself that they can't fulfill you. And what your soul actually is truly longing for is that state of total emptiness. Because to be empty of self is to be full of the divine, right? And you can do it that way, or you can accept the truth spoken by the Buddha, by Christ, by Krishna, all the great masters, that desirelessness is the state of divinity. And you can say, okay, the great masters have said this, my heart doesn't believe it, or my ego doesn't believe it. Like, deep inside, everything in me is saying, no, these things will fulfill me. But I'm going to trust the words of truth spoken by the masters. And I'm going to pursue that state of, like, yes, God, there's karmas and vasanas and desires in me, but I don't want them. I know they're fruitless. I know they lead nowhere. So please empty me of these desires. Fill me with you. I want to get to the place where I want absolutely nothing from life. And that was kind of where I began. I had a ton of desires and karmas in the system, but I began with that conviction that they aren't true. And if you hold fast to that, that conviction strengthens quickly. And I think that that's the quickest route to alleviating suffering versus working through your desires. Both are equally valid, and our souls come here to work through desires. But the shortcut is really getting to a place where you go, okay, you know, if you imagine like a conveyor belt of all the desires your ego has, you're like, all right, so I've achieved, 10% of these desires. They didn't fulfill me. I've got 90% left on this conveyor belt, but I'm not so convinced. I think that the other 90% also won't do it. So let me just skip over all of that junk. Like, you have access to that. It takes a lot of conviction and a lot of passion, but anyone who wants true liberation, I mean, that's the realization you will eventually have.
Yeah. It's really interesting because I think it's hard looking at it from wherever you are. I know everybody listening is thinking of all the things that they want right now. And it's like, if you can just start with opening up yourself to not being limited and anything is possible. And then in that, knowing that when you come to that place of desirelessness, where you're just choosing to know, to believe and trust in the fact that you weren't here to have things, right? You weren't even here, maybe even to find love, but that's a story that we're all told, right? I mean, from birth, I basically was like, my husband is coming.
Especially in Christianity.
Yeah. And there was one time when Aaron and I, because we're so close growing up, I mean, we're only a year and 9 months apart. And this is actually the time when we're closest in age, because he just turned 32. I'm 33, but turning 34 in a couple months. And so we were so close, like we even would pretend get married, not like that, y'all, but like we were like 2, 2 and 4.
Dress up and stuff.
But I remember mom once was telling me about how God was going to give me my husband one day. And Aaron came in and I was like, God's going to give me a husband, and you were like, no,
let me alone.
And he was like, no, you're supposed to be with me, like mom and dad, because that's all we had of our concept of like, no, we're just gonna be together forever, which we are. But it's like, it's really funny, the concepts that we have from childhood that have written a story in your heart, in your life, in your mind, in your framework of like, what does life look like and what am I supposed to have? And so it's just good to just allow yourself the opportunity of going back through those things, because even now, like I just left a 5-year relationship, right? And I'm turning 34. So I could have a lot of fear around my future, right? And all those things I want kids, I want the home, I want the white picket fence, I want 3 chickens, 2 ducks, and 1 pig rescued. And, I have it all mapped out of what I want. And yet I have to hold loosely. I have to actually not even hold on to it at all. I have to give it up and know, well, that's maybe like what I've come up with, but there's something so much better. So wherever you are in your life, I think it's just a really cool encouragement to see Aaron's journey, my journey, which both are very similar, but yet very unique. And I think just seeing that, that's where it starts, is wanting to know truth, is wanting to live a life that is fulfilling and not constantly grasping for the next thing, right? Because that's so unfulfilling.
Yeah, it's all bondage.
Yeah.
It just is. One of the things about my journey that people will often say is like, I can't believe you were depressed.
Yeah.
Like you had it all.
Yep.
I was a fitness model, 2-time winning bodybuilder, about to become a pro bodybuilder. I worked at Google as a trainer, the best company on earth, literally you could work at, making decent money as a personal trainer at least, and seemingly on top of the world.
Ruggedly handsome.
None of it, that always cracks me up, ruggedly handsome.
I know.
But yeah, none of it made me happy. In fact, all of it, I can't really explain how or why, but it led to more suffering. Yeah. Because it was like I would be at the mountaintop where I was told, you can find happiness. Really good. Winning a show will make you happy. Yep. Did that, didn't make me happy. Being a signed fitness model will make you, no, it didn't. Finding the perfect girl will make you, nope. Nothing I chased ever gave me anything but more misery. And I was like, why are these things making me more unhappy? And I think for whatever reason, my soul was just at that place where there was nothing left for it other than self-realization. And so this is where you can use the power of imagination to work through your karma so much quicker. It's like, whatever you're so convinced of, like having kids, then I'll truly be happy. No doubt about it. All right, sit down and imagine it. Live a whole lifetime in your imagination, having kids.
All them diapers.
And put yourself through all of the, probably marital issues here and there. Maybe your kids won't be absolutely perfect and have no problems. Maybe they'll wind up in drugs.
Maybe they won't like you.
Pregnant early. Maybe they'll hate you. Yeah. So it's like, put yourself through all those scenarios. And it's like, if I don't have self-realization, if I don't have connection with the divine, if I'm not free of suffering, what do I have?
Yeah.
For what? For who? I'll be an unhappy mother. So it's like, no matter what way you slice it, you always come back to freedom is what I want. Like true universal love is what I want. And so you can use your imagination to work through those desires and imagine them and convince yourself, no, they can't make me happy. And that was what took a while for me to working through many long-term relationships because of the marriage thing we were given, finding a wife as young as possible, having kids. That's what'll make you happy. That's God's plan for your life. So it's like, well, who am I to question God's plan? I better do it.
And like, you can't have sex until then. So it's like, well, of course I'm going to get married as soon as possible.
Right. So double the urgency. And I did. I got married at 23 and it was a horrible, painful experience. I did everything right. I followed the textbook
exactly
to the
how
letter.
You should court her, date her.
Celibate for a year and a half together before marriage. And without going into detail, the whole marriage was a disaster. Like our relationship was great, but we just had really deep marital issues that I was told by everybody, parents, youth pastors, Christian teachers, everyone, if you just don't have sex before marriage, God will bless your life in all these ways.
This one thing you can't do your whole life. And if you don't do it, you'll be blessed for your whole life. It's like so much pressure.
Everything hinges on this one impossible thing. And I did the impossible thing. And it was like, God let me down. It's like, dude, I suffered egregiously for you for a year and a half. And you put me in even worse suffering. Like I would rather relive the last year and a half of celibacy than this. So that was another huge catalyst for me to be like, maybe this version of God isn't real.
And this version of how I'm supposed to live my life.
Because it doesn't work.
And also living under that shame and honor culture is no joke. And especially as pastors' kids, we didn't have that really from our parents, but we had that from church members of like, you're not supposed to dress this way, act this way, talk this way, do these things, right? We couldn't hang out with certain kids because then we are associated with that. And so it's just, it's no way to live your life under that type of pressure. And it's unfulfilling. It really is. And I can't tell you how many people I talk to, because on the Soulish podcast, the majority of you are women. And thank you for all the men out there that listen, but also the majority of you guys also come from a religious background and are curious about spirituality or are moving into spirituality. And so I know that you guys can relate to this because of all the comments, every DM that I get, every story that you guys share with me, which thank you, by the way, it blesses me every time. That's the same thing. That's the same struggle. And even when you're outside of it, still feeling shame and guilt. Like I still feel that over sex, over just even cussing even, and just like, it's like, whoa, like all my life, I couldn't say the fuck word. So it's just, I think just living in that way and opening yourself up and really pursuing that connection with the divine is really like kind of my only desire at this point. Like, I mean, I'm sure there's other desires out there, but it's like, that's becoming my one desire is to be so connected in that way. And it's just a beautiful thing.
It's like, let me just make use of this lifetime by doing the most important thing anyone can do, which is reach for self-realization, to know my oneness with God. And as long as that's your vision and your your constant desire, like let the things come up. Who cares? Let the mistakes happen. Let the other desires manifest. These things play themselves out as they have to. But I think to your point about that voice always being there.
Yeah.
Because for me, it has been too. It's like it gets so conditioned in your mind that it just becomes a program. And so even when you're in a celibate, monogamous, healthy, conscious relationship, there's still that voice of shame every time you're intimate. And it's like, I got to this place of like, will that ever go away? Swearing, like things like that. There's always a little voice of like, shame on you.
Yeah.
And
you're doing bad things.
You're very, very bad and you should feel bad. And you know what I've realized is that I'm totally okay with that voice being there because, you know, everything is serving a purpose, right?
Right.
And in a very real way, that voice, we call it the voice of the accuser, right? In Christianity, it keeps you sharp because it's like you're always having to debate that voice of separation, you know, the separation consciousness. It's always speaking and it keeps you on your toes of like, no, that's not true. That's an illusion. I am one and there's no separation. There's no one to feel shame here. There's nothing wrong, as Ra would say. There's no mistakes.
I'm not a separate self, my good and my bad self.
Yeah. And without that voice being there, maybe I wouldn't be as sharp and be as capable of teaching these things as I am. So I actually wanted to ask you a question, Whitney. Because everybody knows my journey and I've talked about it. What made me question and leave the old dogmatic views behind. But I'd like to hear more about your journey in questioning, because we haven't really talked about it a whole lot.
We haven't, that's right.
You've mentioned that like seeing me do it sparked things in you, but I'd like to know more about like what were some of the first things you questioned and how did you come to those conclusions?
I think a lot of because we had some really like intense conversations. It was when you were actually still married, living in Oklahoma. Remember, we went to a diner and you were like laying it down on heaven and hell. And I was like, oh my God, like I can't not think about heaven and hell. Like that challenges so many things. and you were like, no, wait, you got to think about this. So I read Victorious Eschatology. I read so many things. I spent actually 9 months studying that. And going back in scripture and not finding anything. And I'm like, holy shit, everything he said is true.
It's the Matrix.
Oh,
he red pilled me.
So I think there was some things, and certainly like I credit this guy a lot to my journey, but I think it was really because I went to Christ for the Nations Institute and I wanted to be a youth pastor. I wanted to work with youth. I wanted to lead worship. So I pursued that hardcore. And I found a lot of things, even in ministry school, of what people were doing and really struggling with the same things that we just talked about. But I just saw this thing of like, man, this like, I don't understand why it is so hard, you know, to be devoted, to live a sinless life or to pursue purity or whatever. And so I always kind of was looking at that and going, but their life is okay. Like, you know, they're not having any major consequences other than just getting kicked out of CFNI, but, or suspended or whatever. But I think it was in ministry school that I saw a lot of dirty political
hypocrisy.
Yes. My last year there was awful.
I remember that.
Yeah. I came home and my skin looked good now because I've been doing stuff, but oh my God, from the stress and the hormones, my mom said like, she's never seen me more broke. I mean, I had chronic acne. And the director of, the 3rd year program that I was in, I saw him using people for his benefit to make him look good. Right. And so that was something that when I was in that class, like I actually got a premonition once from one of the teachers, that he was going to call on me for some assignment. And it was call whoever your like most amazing person you've ever thought of. For me, it was Joyce Meyer at that point. So he was like, call whoever it is and tell them that you're booking a lunch appointment with them in the next week. And we're poor college students that don't have money to fly. And I'm like, why would I set up an appointment with somebody that I can't? And Zoom and Skype really didn't exist back then. And so I didn't do it, but I wrote out a paper of why I didn't do it, but of what I would have talked about. You know, I did the assignment, but I didn't do the full thing of what he wanted to do. I think only 4 people did, but I had this dream that he called on me. And the way that I reacted in my dream was how I would have reacted had I not been told. I would have been like feisty. But I feel like it was God just giving me this premonition, and it literally happened exactly how it was in the dream. And I know, like, I'm learning more about how psychic or intuitive I am now. So now I look back and I'm like, yeah, of course that would have happened. Of course I would have caught on to that of what was going to happen. But
Yeah.
It was also that moment of seeing someone who is supposed to be the most loving. He was one of the most popular pastors, popular teachers. He wasn't bad to look at. And yet he was the most nasty, vile person I've ever like come into, contact with, in the way that he shamed and bullied. And it was just awful.
That's the God he believes in.
Yeah. And also we weren't doing what he wanted us to do, right? So it's like, no, I control you. I tell you what to do. So it's things like that started to ping me, like something isn't right here. Like, if this is my religion, this is what I believe, right? This is what I live my life according to. And yet this is how these people who seem to be on the end of like making it, right, in ministry and all of that, this is what that looks like. I don't want any part of it. So I thought, I'm just going to be different, right?
Yeah.
Then I got into ministry and I became a youth director. And then I'm not being acknowledged in the church that I'm actually a youth director at, because I'm a woman. And then yet I'm serving and working at Starbucks, like any hours that I can get. I'm picking kids up from parties and things like that to ensure that they're safe, and I got my kids off meth, drugs. I did.
You lived the life.
I did really good. Yeah. I mean, I did. Yeah. I lived the life. And yet as that progressed and I got into young adult ministry, that's where it really just became real, because I was living with women that I'm also managing and ministering to and having a relationship with. And that's where the rubber met the road for me, as far as like, now you're living it and you're living with them, and you get to experience the consequences of religion, of what you're taught, of how things are supposed to go. Like when someone sins, you're supposed to bring it to leadership, right? And that goes past me. I have to bring it to pastors, who then have to speak to the overall leadership team, depending on what kind of sin it is, especially if it's sex. And so I saw how shame was reinforced, and then how I lost relationships. And I just realized that this isn't love. This isn't healing. This isn't helping people at the end of the day. This is actually ruining lives and ruining relationships, and even people's connection and relationship and concept of God. Even that, people are like, if this is how God, these people are demonstrating God to me, right?
Yeah.
And if this is how God is, at the end of the day, I don't want it. And I realized I want no part in this, no part.
Yeah.
And I think also because my journey, I'm more on the intuitive healing. I'm a Reiki practitioner as well. You guys know that. But Aaron's more on like the teaching side. And what my journey has been is to understand how to heal, and then how to help people heal. And so I was realizing that I was damaging people, that I wasn't contributing to healing and wholeness and growth and development in a good way. I was actually causing hurt and shame. And for me, that was like, this is against my very nature.
Yeah.
So for me, I think I was questioning things based off of what I was experiencing. I was seeing the immediate consequences, and also consequences years later, and was seeing, this is not helping people. This doesn't feel good for me. This is not how I want to live my life. And I also don't want to be under that shame and guilt and worry, constant worry that, am I failing at what I'm called to do and destined to do? Am I failing at that? I just couldn't deal with that anymore. So I realized I need to toss everything up in the air.
Yeah.
Like, okay, if I don't ever sing again ever, then I need to be okay with that. That was a huge identity for me, of like, I'm the singer, I'm the worship leader, right? I'm putting out all these songs and I have to become successful. And that wasn't becoming successful. And so I think a lot of things were tossed up for me in the air, and I just saw where it landed. And just really in the last year, like it just, I don't know if it was the pandemic from what it was, but I just immediately started hearing and getting these nudges of this is like the path that you're supposed to explore. And it doesn't have to be so niche. You don't have to have everything figured out, but this is something that is obviously longing in my heart to experience and to explore. And it really brought me through to the spiritual path of finding that connectedness again. Because I think when I left the church, I felt like a long time, like I had left God.
Right.
And so,
because that's what they tell you.
Yeah.
That's another hard part about it is like, one, accepting, and this isn't true, but it's how it feels at the time.
Yeah.
Everything you've ever believed has been wrong. Your whole life has been a lie. Like it's hard to swallow that pill.
Yeah.
Which is why typically people who leave the church are almost always younger people. Because like, well, I have a whole life ahead of me to get it right. And like you almost, I mean, I've never seen somebody in their 40s, 50s or 60s leave the church. I've never seen it. It happens, but it's very rare because it's like, I have to abandon 50, 60 years of life as a mistake.
Yeah.
And the ego can't handle that.
Yeah.
So that's the first hard hurdle to cross. And then the second one is everyone I know and respect is also wrong.
Yeah.
Like surely everyone can't be wrong. Like it's your reference frame is so limited. It's hard for you to realize, no, there's a whole world of credible people and ideas outside of this box. It's not like all intelligent people or respectable people are wrong. It's just in this paradigm, they're wrong.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's a lot that we got right. And that was the idea of like, if I question this version of God, I'm questioning God, period.
Yeah.
Like it's so hard to divorce the old beliefs from leaving God open to be a mystery. Like I don't know who God is. It's so hard for the mind to detach what it's always been conditioned and taught to believe. So it's like, there's so many huge hurdles to overcome. And that's why the only real way I think it happens for people, like it happened for us, is seeing the hypocrisy, seeing the evidence that this doesn't work and that everyone involved in this thought system is losing the game too. Like that will eventually convince you to be like, okay, I'm willing to accept all of these things.
Yeah. And I think too that part of that journey of breaking away can be so painful because of the loss of community. And I think
the third one.
And
no more friends for a while.
Friends. And everybody kind of looking at you weird if you run into them. And I think you also experienced that too when you were really like talking about things and raising questions. It was old church people and still current church people from when we grew up that were really harsh on Facebook. Harsh is saying it nicely.
We're not very Christ-like.
No.
Even some pretty well-known ministers would come on my page to debate me. And I would sort of be like, I'm a nobody. Like, why are you, who have this huge platform and all these books you've written and stuff, why are you coming to debate me, who seemingly is a nobody? And I realized it's because the things I'm saying are really good arguments and are getting a lot of attention from people because it's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And so it stirs up people's egos to be like, oh, I got to get in there and prove that I'm right. And so I was just attracting so many moths to that flame. And even people we grew up with who would say things to me that would make me go, yeah, see, that's exactly the God I don't believe in anymore. Like, that's the shit I left Christianity for. Thanks for reminding me. Like this, like, you better be careful, Aaron. You better be careful of your words. I'd be like, careful of who? You? I would ask them, careful of who? Of God? Is God going to come strike me down with his wrath and anger? That's exactly the God I left Christianity for. And they're sort of like, oh, whoops. Like you're reinforcing everything I'm saying, but you don't realize it.
Which that concept of God being a God of wrath and serving like the hammer, of like judgment is something too that's really strong in Christianity, that you just wonder why people want to hang on to that. Why would you want to believe in that?
Because it's a projection of their ego. The need to be right, the need to have all the answers and have certainty. And if you threaten my certainty, I'm coming after you. But not me, God is on my behalf. It really is my ego that wants to come after you. But I'll just say it's God who's doing it. And it's like something in your subconscious, intuitive faculties begin to see that when you have these interactions. You're like, hey, it's just you that's pissed off. And then you're projecting that onto God. It's like, I see this, I see how this works. So it's like, it's not your fault. You can't see it either because you're trapped in it. But it's like, you have to see it in yourself to be liberated from it. And I saw that same, for lack of a better word, demon in myself. And when I rejected it in myself, it no longer threatened me in other people.
Right.
Because I just knew it was not true. It's like, no matter.
That's so good. That's so good.
Which part?
The part you just said about if I deal with it in me, it
can't threaten me externally anymore.
It doesn't threaten you.
Yeah.
Because even in spirituality, we see that, right?
Exactly.
We've been seeing the same things in a different costume in this journey.
Ego wears all the costumes.
Yeah.
Spiritual ego, Christian ego, Buddhist ego. There's fundamentalism everywhere. Fundamentalism is approaching the divine through external means, like memorizing concepts, following rituals, dogmas, whatever. And it is also the need to be right and the need to know. Whereas mysticism is the opposite. It's approaching the divine internally through meditation, contemplation, prayer, and making sure God is always a mystery.
Yeah.
Like always being in that realm of like, I don't know who you are. Please show me who you are. No matter how many revelations you get, you stay in that don't know mind. That's mysticism.
Yeah. And I think too, like when you were talking about, you know, being like having judgment within yourself, or having something that is limiting you, I always think of it like any place where I have limitation within me. So if I'm super judgmental and critical of myself, then that I'm also limiting my world, right? And the people around me. I'm judging and being critical of others. And so it's a real great moment of reflection, right? And kind of going inward and going, where am I limiting myself? Where am I critical of myself? Where am I judgmental of myself? Where do I have limitations on what I can experience in this life? You know, we talk about that a lot in abundance, and you know, that's something where we talk about that limitation. You know, take off the limitations of your mind so you can live in abundance. But in every single area of life, where am I limiting myself? Right? In the depth of relationships that I have with the people in my life, or depth of relationship within me and God and source, universe, spirit. And I think that's a really great place to free yourself, because then you actually free your world and you're no longer placing limitations on other people too. And so it actually frees you up. And I think it frees you up to connect in a way with the world around you, the people around you, in a way that you haven't before. And I think that's what I found more than anything else, is I realized how critical of people I was being, how judgy, you know, and automatically like sussing it out in somebody of like, oh yeah, she's, you know, she's a hoe. She a hoe. And realizing, wow, how critical is that of me, right? To just automatically put criticism, but really I was placing that judgment on myself.
Where's the hoe in me?
Right. And I had a hoe in me, and I was like, you know, critical of that inner desire in order to connect, right, in an intimate way with somebody. And I criticized that desire because that is sin, right? And so I think that's part of us finding freedom and healing and wholeness, is anywhere that we have a limitation, a block, right, a hindrance. It's so important to go inward and heal that, because then you actually end up experiencing a whole new world. And that's been maybe the best part about this journey, I think, for both of us, is we found that.
Can't put it into words. Everything I wanted so badly in Christianity, I've found, discovered through just pursuing an authentic spirituality.
Yeah.
Like, stop letting other people tell you what to believe about God, how to pursue God, how to seek God. Find that truth in your heart, because your heart knows.
Yeah.
And I think seeing Christ in the scriptures our whole lives, and reading these stories and hearing the sermons, I was just so passionate about Jesus. And it was like, I wanted what Jesus had. I didn't want to just worship Jesus. Of course I did, but I wanted to be Jesus. Like, I wanted to become Christ.
What would Jesus do?
And it was like hearing these statements of Jesus would just spark something in me. And then I was being told, but Jesus is the exclusive one, and you'll never be like that. Just be glad
he's the Son of God.
Yeah, just be glad he died for your sins, because you're a horrible, evil sinner and he's perfect.
Yeah.
And something in
He
me
was
just
sinless.
said no. And I think it's like, when you love Christ enough, you will get to the place where you begin to realize, like, Jesus was everything that he was, not because he accepted Jesus as his Lord and Savior.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, because he knew I and the Father are one.
Yeah.
And it's like, why can't I know that?
Yeah.
And something in me was like, yeah, I can know that.
And Jesus said, you can know it.
And
Jesus
he said it himself.
Jesus said, you can be it. You can become this. You can have the same thing.
Yeah. You can all be one.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that funny how things get twisted?
Yeah. Well, it's got to be exclusive for it to be special.
Yeah.
You know, that's what ego wants, is specialness,
Yeah.
not oneness.
I think too, this is a little turn here in the conversation, but reincarnation was something that I wrestled with for a while. Yeah. Because we had been taught growing up that you have one shot.
The one shot only model, I like to call it.
The one shot only model. And so there's a lot of pressure around this life, right? And this experience. And I tried to understand, what would the purpose be in reincarnation? Like, what would God's purpose be? And it's been really fun to discover that. And I even had, you guys know, I had Daniel on the podcast, Past Life Regressionist, and he did a mini past life regression on me for the episode, so that I could just have a little taste of it and be able to talk from the experience. But I actually had a past life regression with this one where he was actually my son, and he was encouraging me in that past life of like, it's okay, like don't worry, we're gonna sell everything we need to sell, because we had like a little cabbages and potatoes and I think some onions and little things that we were selling. And you had brought your friend too, which is very Aaron always had a friend, so I was like, his soul does what his soul does. But it was so cool and so much of an experience that it really solidified for me that, like, no, I've had past lives, like, and I've had past lives with this one. This isn't the only life I've spent with you.
It just makes more sense though, right?
It makes way more sense.
Surely a God of infinite intelligence would not expect a person to be able to understand and master all the complexities of life in 75 years.
Learn all the lessons.
Like, it probably takes 7,500 years at least. You know, this is a complicated realm density we're in. Mm-hmm. And like, surely a God of compassion and intelligence would understand that and give us more than just one shot. Mm-hmm. It just makes sense.
And even broader than that, like with the law of one, we have as many lives as we need in order to evolve, right? And so I think that's the ultimate purpose. And when I found the law of one, and I still, full confession, have not finished it because I keep going back to like all these other chapters because it's such an eye opener. So any of you who do that and haven't read it through, no guilt. I do it too. And this is my brother, the law of one teacher, who always tells me to read read all the damn sessions.
You just got to go through it just over and over again.
Yeah.
Finish it, start over, finish it, start over.
So dang good. But I just realized that, like, got it. Like, it hit me like, this is the ultimate purpose, is that we are meant to experience life and to grow and to become love, become wisdom. We're supposed to evolve. And this is not a one-time shot. This is a soul's time of learning and evolving and then becoming one. And so, like, even that concept of social memory complex, I was like, yes, it like did my heart good to know, technically, yes, we get to be together forever. Yeah. You can't rid yourself of me.
I mean, that's what we all want, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's cool to think of that, of like, I'll spend the rest of eternity with my family and everybody else that I meet. And I think that's the exciting part about life, is everyone I meet, even at a dog park, I'm going, I think we knew each other because this is probably not the first time we've had some sort of interaction, and if it is, cool. Like, but I just think I see people as I'm way more connected. That person is a part of me. They're an extension. Right. Yeah. And that's even still having the separate mentality of they're an extension of me. And then it's like, no, they are me.
They're me.
They're me. And so that's been like maybe the best the best part about understanding what is life.
Yeah.
What are we meant to experience?
It's an experience, right? It's not a concept. It starts as a concept, but it has to be a living truth that you apply to your perception and begin considering it and staying with it and meditating on it. And it starts to come to life in you. It's like you meet someone totally, strange to you, you've never met in your life. And that recognition is there of like, that's just me living in another body in another lifetime. And suddenly the heart begins to feel it. And you just have this sense, this intuition that you just know. You're like, that is me in another body. And then love is just this automatic outpouring that just happens.
Because that's you. So why would you treat yourself like shit?
It hurts you to hurt yourself in another form.
Yep. And it just makes you realize with all the social issues we have, in our country, in our world, it's like, yes, Black Lives Matter, any life matters. And we need to raise our understanding of that, of we are so much more connected than we know, and understand. And so every life matters, every precious being, not even just human, but even like we got our dogs, and it's like, I'm always thinking like, how can I help you raise your vibrations today and your level of consciousness? How can we make you a human next time? So I think it's really fun and it's invigorating and it's inspiring and encouraging to live your life that way of knowing this is everything is a part of me in this world. And so I need to love it, take care of it, cherish it, steward it.
Yeah. That's Christ consciousness.
How do we end this thing? This shebang?
We just end it. The end.
The end. We love you all.
Love you guys. It was spontaneous and I just went with it.